We dipped our back tires in the Pacific. It's this corny thing to do because then you dip your front tires in the Atlantic when you get there, which I haven't done yet, incidentally. I don't know why. Oh, and I got this funny video of him like pretending to fall off this rock into the ocean because he's a gifted physical comedian. Could have done that for real. And then there are those pictures I don't remember taking of him. Maybe losing those is worse than losing the ones I do. It it took him about 45 minutes to get him out. And the funny thing is, he hadn't even sustained any trauma to his head or anything. He'd just been face down in the mud under hundreds of pounds of weight so long that he'd suffocated. And the part that everyone's pissed at me about is after I filled out all the paperwork, I went to the police station, I called his mom, called my mom. I got back on my bike and kept riding. So, 4,000 monologue, or excuse me, 4,000 miles, play by Amy Herzog from 2011. Really awesome, fantastic play. Highly recommend reading it. Only 4 characters, one guy, 2 about college age women, and then Vera, who we'll talk about in a second, is great grandma. The character Leo, who is the protagonist of the play, this is his monologue. Not super specific, really male 20s, has to at least be fit enough to seem like they could bike across country. The plot of this show is that before the action of the play, Leo and his friend Micah were going on a cross-country bicycle trip, I think from Seattle to New York, which is why at the beginning he talks about dipping his tires in one, and the idea of dipping into the other, sort of just conclusion of the trip. But halfway through, somewhere in Kansas, there's a tractor trailer full of chickens from Tyson, and Micah is getting filmed. They keep trading off, but the tractor trailer tips over and crushes Micah, and this is the first time he's really telling anyone about it in any depth. Anyone who would listen and would know anything about his past. And so before that happens in the play, like he says at the end of the monologue, instead of turning back around and heading back home, because obviously he's dealing with a lot of stress, he wants to sort of finish the trip for the two of them. So he gets to New York, and stays at his great-grandmother's place, Vera. That's his great-grandmother. Obviously they haven't seen each other in a little bit, and the huge gap of generations brings out a lot of comedy in the play. Specifically, and this monologue is actually about a 6 or 7 minute monologue. It's all one long bit of text. This is just the last minute, and it's really sweet and funny how it ends with Vera. As soon as he finishes there, Vera's like, "Well, I didn't have my hearing aid in, so I just didn't want to interrupt." And it's cute. It's a really nice way to end the scene for the audience, but for the actor too. Even though it's not part of this monologue, you should keep in mind that this is the end of a long retelling of this story. He's gone through the more specific details earlier in the monologue, so when he tells it this time, it's a match between what he's already said in that about 5 minutes before about the actual details of what was going on, with the emotional realization that comes with being uninterrupted for a while. There's no one interjecting and causing him to change his train of thought. It's all exactly what he was doing or wants to do. Visceral memory, obviously. So don't don't get to the dangerous level of emotional recall, but it's got to be so painful to know, because they're in the middle of Kansas, so it's going to take a long time, like he says, about 45 minutes, for local police, etc., to get the resources to deal with that. And then you've got all these chickens making loud noises. You know, they're in pain too, looking for his friend. You've got this Tyson PR lady that shows up. That's why he's talking about the pictures in the monologue, because she confiscates the camera so they don't get bad PR. And for him, the camera is not just the physical memories. You know, part of what he do in this monologue is tie physical memories into emotional life, and that's what makes it a really strong one. So on to the analysis of it. What's really great about Amy Herzog as a playwright, in my opinion, and for actors, all actors should love playwrights that do this. She doesn't give a whole bunch of internal notes and stage directions. Sometimes, and for some plays, it's called for and extremely helpful. But Amy Herzog doesn't do that very much. So in this whole bit of text, there's only one italicized area, and that would be the word silence. Right after he says, "Losing those is worse than losing the. It might be worse than losing the ones I do." It's a moment of silence there, and she also does without using the words. She breaks up the monologue into different paragraphs at important beat changes. So they're not full beat changes. They shouldn't be lingered on like a beat change, but for that moment of silence, because it's specified and it's effectively a beat change. So what's really great about this monologue is that beat gives you basically two 45-second monologues to do. Partially, this is one of the reasons why it's on a lot of people's lists of overdone monologues, which is too bad because it's really great, but that's why it's overdone. So the first beat is where you have to win the audience over. You've got to really demonstrate the joy of this friendship, because this is the last time he's remembering all the good things about his friend. And most auditioners might know this monologue or be keen to what you're leading at. But if they don't, or if you execute really well, it doesn't matter. The fact that first beat gives you, it's basically a story about, wow, I've got this awesome friend. Like, oh man, this guy's really, really cool. And everything's great. And then you start sneaking into past tense. So that leads up to that beat change. Joy in the memories that leads to the huge downward arc that happens pretty quick. You don't want it to happen too quick until the beat, but those memories have got to start seeping in as soon as the joy hits, but mix and match those a little bit depending on how you feel as the actor to it. I post this, all of my posts should come with the caveat that this is just one person's opinion. Just trying to be helpful on what you can and can't, the ways you can think about approaching monologues for younger actors, people who need help figuring out why their auditions seem to be not going as they want. You can do this whole monologue in a different way, and it doesn't mean it's wrong, but just to clarify. So then, living in the past and approaching the stressful reality, that's that whole arc of the first part. Second monologue, or second beat of this monologue, starts with the silence. So that silence is, like I said, a beat change of its own, but it's got to be really full, because in that, coming out of that monologue, the first thing he says is it took about 45 seconds to get him out, or 45 minutes to get him out, I should say. And that's that's a long period of time that he's not saying anything. That he's not explaining to the audience. 45 minutes of his friend waiting for his friend to see if he's alive, what happened to him, how his condition, and that should all be visible in that beat change. That there's a lot of things going on there. What I've got here is balancing the anger at the PR lady, the anger at the driver, the anger at himself, the guilt that the it should have been me complex, the sadness obviously of that moment, the shock, because when he's at the incident, and like he explains at the end of that monologue there, he's not really processing what's going on. He's goes to the police station, fills out paperwork, calls the parents, and gets right back on his bike. And so this is one of the first times he's had an emotional connection with someone about this incident. And so he's sort of been living in the state of shock. And speaking it probably helps for him, but he's never spoken it like this before. So he's shocked in the moment at like, how's this coming out of me? Because I'm just it's just coming out, and I haven't thought about how to verbalize this, but also living with the shock of the incident, obviously, because it's not like, he had been in a hospital for months or anything. Just all of a sudden, this really young, talented, great friend of his gone right in front of his eyes. So all those stuff need to be balanced throughout the text, but specifically, there's got to start boiling in that little beat, in that moment of silence. And then I think a big part of this monologue is the courage at the end. Dude, I've seen this monologue done with with different approaches. Sort of like a defeated at the end when he says, "I kept writing," and yeah, it's a mix of both. But I think the stronger choice is to show some courage at the end, that despite all of this, and despite the fact that his family is even getting on his case about not coming home, and he's thinking, well, I'm doing the right thing. Like, I know it's all out of your control. I'm doing what's best for me. And at that last moment, he's convincing himself, this was the right choice. This is what was best for me. And it brings that arc right back up, because he's happy at the beginning of the monologue when he's just thinking of the memories. Then you get a real quick downward arc. I hit rock bottom when he's talking about the incident. And then if you can bring that right back up at the end, it shows to the auditioners a huge amount of emotional versatility that you just don't find in a lot of minute and a half long monologues. So all in all, the language of this monologue too, this doesn't, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't call for any specific accent work or anything. Just natural, just however you naturally sound will most likely work. Unless you're Gilbert Gottfried, I just don't audition for this role. But the language is very conversational. It's definitely not written in meter. It's not like there's a lot of alliteration or fancy. It's super contemporary, almost laid back how he speaks about things. And I would definitely, just like before every monologue, you should read the play. Everyone says it, but you gotta read the play, because I've been in audition rooms. I know plenty of people who've been in audition rooms where they haven't read the play, and then afterwards the director will be like, "So why'd you make that choice there? Because that's not at all consistent with the character." And sometimes you can get away with that in a monologue setting, but sometimes you'll stumble on a director who's like, "I love this play. I directed this play. That was a terrible rendition of what I see of it." And you win some, you lose some, but read the play, but specifically study that full 6 minutes. And you should practice the 5 minutes beforehand in your head before doing the minute-long monologue, just so you can start getting into that flow of how the emotions and the language seep into this guy. Great monologue. Definitely, if you have comments on this, either not, I don't care if you comment on my performance if you want. Not really relevant. Just doing it on a camera sitting down. So comment with your own performances of it if you want, or links to other things. If you have other monologues you want to see reviewed, I'm starting to do this pretty regularly now, so you can leave a comment with any sort of monologue you think that you like, or you want to prep for something and you don't really know how. I'll read all of those and see what's going on. Thank you so much, guys.